The Roman Empire, an ancient superpower, renowned for its splendor, sophistication, and savagery.
Let the games begin!
The Romans ruled vast territories that stretched from the wild Atlantic coast of Britain to the parched deserts of the Middle East. I'm traveling across the Roman world.
But
to discover how the Romans built their great empire.
Don't go upsetting him, you old dog. Or you'll have me to answer to.
Conquering foreign lands with violence and brutality. From the early years, facing and defeating the might of Carthage and its legendary commander, Hannibal Barca, to the rise of Julius Caesar, whose bloody conquests drove Rome to new heights.
Pompey and I had an agreement.
Before his searing success threatened to tear Rome apart. The Battle of Zama, fought in unforgiving territory in North Africa on October the 19th, 202 BC. It was one of the most critical showdowns in world history. An epic struggle between two of the greatest powers of the ancient world. It was a winner-takes-all confrontation between the reigning champion, Carthage, and the upstart challenger, Rome. Now, 500 years before this titanic battle, Rome had been pretty much like any other small-time Mediterranean settlement. And in this case, a bunch of wooden houses around the River Tiber, surrounded by these protecting hills. Indeed, Rome's would-be empire was just 4 tightly packed square miles, with a population of a mere 60,000. But there seemed to be something special in the Roman DNA, something that drove her to the top of the pile. Even by ancient standards, the Romans fetishized violence and aggression and ambition. It seems that this little state had a hard, flinty determination to make their mark on the world. From its foothold on the Tiber, Rome pushed out into central Italy, subjugating its neighbours with pitiless determination. By 264 BC, all of Italy had been conquered or coerced. But that wasn't enough. Anyone standing in Rome's way was a threat that needed to be quashed. Next in line for Rome's insatiable ambition was Carthage. Carthage was the sparkling jewel of the Mediterranean, with trading networks and colonies from Lebanon in the east to Spain in the west. It was both the benchmark for Rome and an obstacle blocking the way. These two powers were about to come head to head. Carthage, the dominant force in the ancient world, versus Rome, the new kid on the block. The fields of Europe and North Africa were to be giant battlegrounds, with one man emerging to block Rome's overweening ambition. His name was Hannibal Barca, the legendary Carthaginian general, a man determined to kill the dream of a Roman Empire in the cradle. In 218 BC, Hannibal launched one of the most famous and daring military maneuvers in history. He marched from Spain with a multi-ethnic army and 38 war elephants across the frozen Alps and into Italy. With victory after victory, Hannibal and his army drove deeper south. Rome was in serious danger. Historian Mike Loades has analysed Hannibal's military genius. What an exceptional man Hannibal must have been.
Hannibal is such a legend because he was both a strategic genius and a tactical genius. He led a polyglot army. He had Numidians from North Africa. He had his Libyphoenicians from North Africa. He had Iberian troops from his Spanish campaigns. And he supposedly spoke to all these people in their own languages. He was a soldier's general. What greater testament could there be to his character? These men willingly followed him on this great and dangerous adventure.
Hannibal smashed his way from victory to victory, undefeated and seemingly unbeatable. Rome's dreams of empire were being crushed at source. Eventually, in August 216 BC, at Cannae in southern Italy, a huge Roman army was assembled, the largest force ever put in the field. It was 80,000 strong, twice the size of Hannibal's, and the Roman generals were confident of victory. But the badly needed victory didn't come. Instead, devastating defeat. This surely spelled the end for Rome. More than 40,000 men, over half of Rome's fighting force, were massacred. Hannibal's victory at Cannae stands as one of the most memorable military feats of all time. But according to the great historian Livy, from this critical moment in Rome's history emerged a saviour. Publius Cornelius Scipio. This was the man who would lead the fight back and show the world that Rome's destiny could not be stopped. (216 BC). Immediately after their crushing defeat at Cannae at the hands of Hannibal, Rome's dreams of empire lay in disarray. Its armies all but destroyed. In the aftermath of the battle, a young Roman army officer, Scipio, was on the run in enemy territory with a fellow soldier. Desertion and self-preservation were obvious choices.
I'm done hiding in ditches. I'm heading to the coast. Are you with me?
But not for Scipio.
I swear that I will never desert Rome. If I break my vow, may Jupiter himself bring to me a shameful death. Now you! Take the sword from my throat, and I'll swear it. Swear it! I swear never to desert Rome. If I break my oath, may Jupiter bring me to a shameful death.
Scipio's refusal to abandon Rome at this critical time
Rome is this way.
would become part of Roman folklore. But in the immediate aftermath of Cannae, all thoughts of future glory seemed doomed. When news of the slaughter reached Rome, fear swept through the city. Hannibal could arrive at the gates at any moment. Panic was threatening to take hold of the city. Almost every household had lost someone, and the sound of wailing mourners filled the streets. The politicians had to get a grip on the situation. At the time of Cannae, the Roman Senate was in charge of administration of the city, and they called an emergency meeting in a building that's now buried right underneath this church. Fearful and indecisive, the Senate sought the guidance of an establishment figure from one of Rome's most distinguished families. Quintus Fabius Maximus was an elder statesman and celebrated general who'd advised against fighting Hannibal at Cannae.
Senator.
He now took control of the city. One of Fabius Maximus's first actions was to ban female mourners from the streets in an effort to restore calm. In effect, weeping was outlawed, but that wasn't enough. The Roman historian Livy tells us what happens next, and it is an extraordinary, and for us, appalling measure. The defeat at Cannae demanded a scapegoat, and Rome's elite found one in a hapless priestess. One of the city's revered Vestal virgins, she was accused of breaking her vow of chastity and provoking the wrath of the gods, who duly punished Rome with the humiliation of Cannae. It was declared that to appease the gods, the fallen Vestal virgin must be condemned to an horrific fate, sacrificed by being entombed alive.
Is the spectacle really necessary?
Rome is nothing without the favor of the gods.
This was ritual murder, carried out by a terrified people, desperate to exorcise the trauma of defeat. When we think about the Romans, we shouldn't just imagine men and women like us, dressed in togas. This was often a very primitive and deeply superstitious society. There were gods and goddesses and demigods and spirits all around. It was somewhere both of extraordinary sophistication and also sometimes of chilling savagery. The Romans had persuaded themselves that burying a woman alive would help to purify the state, restoring Rome's confidence and vigour, setting her back on the path to empire. Alexander Evers is an expert on the culture of ancient Rome.
Cannae was a huge psychological blow to the Roman mind. And clearly the relationship with the gods must have been, at the time, must have been disturbed. And so the Romans looked for a scapegoat.
It's absolutely horrific.
Gruesome as it may seem to us, burying someone alive, it does work for the Romans. It unites everyone. It pulls them all back together again behind the common cause, which is the war against Hannibal.
The Romans were discovering their unrelenting drive. In the years after Cannae, Rome's war with Carthage spread across the ancient world. In Italy, Rome fought a defensive war against Hannibal's rampant army. The aim was always to stop the Carthaginians from taking the ultimate prize, the city of Rome itself. Slowly, the tide turned, and the Roman generals went on the offensive. In 210 BC, 8 years after Cannae, they launched a major counterattack against Carthage's main power base, Spain. In command during this daring mission was none other than Scipio, the survivor of Cannae and the singular man brave enough to take on a job most considered a death sentence. Scipio was just 25 when he took command of the Roman armies in Spain, and almost immediately he turned the war in Rome's favour by capturing Carthaginian forces and cities. But he did so with a combination of cunning and downright cruelty that would come to be a hallmark of Roman warfare. This is Illiturgis, Andalusia, the site of the city attacked by Scipio in 206 BC. There are some remarkable finds here that are transforming our understanding of how the Romans clawed back control at the expense of the Carthaginians. A group of Spanish archaeologists, led by Juan Pedro Bellon, have recently uncovered chilling evidence of how Scipio brought ruthless, total war to anyone who dared resist Rome.
This is a typical Iberian town, and in this area we have all the houses of the city.
And do you have evidence of conflict here?
Yes, of course. We have found a lot of evidence.
Gosh.
If you follow me, I can show you it.
The people of Illiturgis had long been allies of Carthage, and they'd reaped the rewards of prosperity and stability. But Scipio wanted to send out a message to populations across the Mediterranean. Join Rome or face destruction. Juan Pedro's team have uncovered signs of Scipio's savage warning. So talk me through what you've got on the table.
For example, this is hobnails from the Roman Caligae.
Hobnails from the Roman boots?
Yes.
That's really significant, isn't it? Because the hobnail boot is a real emblem of the Romans.
Yes, and this kind of pieces allow us to follow the path of a Roman army.
Yes.
It's very useful for us.
Amazing. And this is, I know, very typical, horrible, ferocious Roman weapon,
Yes.
isn't it?
In this case, belong to the Roman artillery.
Yeah, because this is from a ballista bolt, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
We think that Scipio comes with the weapons related with his idea of destroying the city. We think that there is a kind of genocide by the Romans because we have no evidence of population in the landscape after the siege.
So the population here is pretty much wiped out then?
Yes, probably 80-90% of the population was eliminated.
The evidence found by Juan Pedro and his team is compelling. At the exact historical moment that Roman weapons appear in this landscape, nearly all signs of life in Illiturgis disappear from the archaeological record. This would be the template for Rome's rising empire. Territory won and populations wiped out or forced into slavery. Just listen to what the Roman author Livy wrote about the battle here. No one thought of taking prisoners alive. No one thought of plunder. They slaughtered the unarmed and the armed alike, the women besides the men. Driven on by a cruel rage, they butchered the infants too. They delighted in destroying all traces of the city and in blotting out the very memory of their enemy's home. It's a very powerful bit of writing, but up until now, we haven't been able to verify it. The finds here, though, tell us that this was the site of an atrocity. Word of the massacre spread incredibly fast, and this actually became one of the Romans' most powerful tools: fear. The message was clear. You don't mess with Rome. You are either with them or against them. It's an early form of state-sponsored terrorism. Scipio's bloody victories in Spain made him Rome's greatest hope to defeat Hannibal. The ferocious battle for ultimate victory between the two rivals was now heading towards its climax, not in Italy or Spain, but on the plains of North Africa. For the winner, the right to rule an empire. (206 BC). After 5 years of bloody fighting, Scipio secured all of Spain for Rome. Filling its coffers with the spoils of war, the Roman state grew stronger still. But if it was to secure the dominance of its own empire, it would still need to defeat Carthage. The final showdown was looming. Scipio returned to Rome a hero, determined to win the war against Hannibal, who, 12 years after crossing the Alps, was still at large in southern Italy. Until now, Rome's leaders had avoided launching another large-scale attack against Hannibal in Italy, terrified of repeating the mistakes of Cannae. Scipio, however, emboldened by his victories in Spain, now proposed a radical and daring plan. He would draw Hannibal out of Italy by sailing with an army to North Africa and attacking Carthage itself. Finally, 2 years after his return from Spain, the Senate relented and agreed Scipio's plan. He set sail for Africa. With Carthage itself now under direct threat, Hannibal had no choice but to return to defend his homeland. And in October 202 BC, on the plains of Zama, about 80 miles inland from Carthage, the two armies came face to face. The stakes were clear. Mastery of the Mediterranean world.
The Battle of Zama was an enormously personal grudge match between Hannibal and Scipio. Both of these men had history, and they met. They allegedly met before the Battle of Zama. It plays into romantic ideals of ancient warfare. It's like two team captains having a handshake before a sporting match.
And even if they are doing this for their own individual civilizations, this is an age where personal glory counts for a huge amount.
Absolutely, the warrior culture. For these two giants of generals now to come face to face, maybe it's because they just wanted to look each other in the eye once. Who knows? But it is a remarkable thing that they had a private solo meeting before this final decisive battle.
Certain peace or uncertain hope of victory. The first I offer you now. The second would be in the hands of the gods.
Here are my terms. You must put yourself and your country entirely at my mercy. So be it.
As Livy makes clear, the stakes could not have been higher. If they were successful, they'd be victors not only for a day, but for all time. They would know before the next day ended whether Rome or Carthage was to give laws to the nations. For not only Africa and Italy, the whole world would be the prize of victory. Great as is the prize, the peril of defeat will be as great. This was written 200 years after Zama, so we know then that the battle loomed large in the Roman imagination. But I am absolutely sure that people at the time realised how critically important it was. This was the culmination of 50 years of on and off conflict between the greatest powers in the Mediterranean. This really was winner takes all. The two great armies faced one another. Hannibal had 36,000 troops, Scipio 30,000. But Scipio had one advantage, thanks to a political masterstroke.
One of the things that Scipio learned from Hannibal is to use troops from other nations, to use specialists. You have got the Numidians with this vastly superior cavalry force from North Africa with their javelins and their fast, agile horses, who had been crucial in all of Hannibal's campaigns for 16 years through Italy, now fighting for Scipio.
And the critical thing about this battle is that it reminds us it's not just brawn but brain that the Romans use, because they've been wooing the Numidians for years. Diplomacy is as important as sheer military strength.
Absolutely. The tables have turned. They had been Hannibal's secret weapon. Now they're Rome's secret weapon.
From the historian Polybius, we have an account of the speech each general gave to his troops.
If you overcome your enemies, you will gain for yourselves and your country the undisputed command and sovereignty of the rest of the world!
This is the day to confirm your reputation for invincibility. Fight bravely and uphold your proud reputation as an army that has never known defeat!
Forward!
Scipio's Numidian cavalry immediately attacked Hannibal's smaller cavalry force, pursuing them into the desert. But as they charged from the battlefield, Scipio had temporarily lost his one advantage. And now the two armies clashed. Hannibal had yet to taste defeat in battle against Rome, and now he was fighting on home ground. Immediately he tried to repeat the tactics he deployed at Cannae, sucking in and encircling the Romans. So far, Scipio's forces had held out against the larger army, but suddenly they were outflanked by the Carthaginians, facing Hannibal's elite, battle-hardened veterans who he'd held back to deliver a killer blow. Scipio's decision over the next few moments would decide the fate of two great empires.
Don't let them pass!
Scipio refused to fall into Hannibal's trap. But outnumbered and without his cavalry, he had to fight desperately for survival. With Rome's superior Numidian cavalry still out of sight, Scipio rushed reinforcements to the centre of the battlefield.
Come on! Forward! In your formations! Now!
Where Hannibal's elite veterans threatened to punch through the Roman lines.
Come on! The centre must hold! Our strongest troops are so far!
Scipio's forces were on the brink of collapse. But the tide was about to turn. The battle had been raging since daybreak. By early afternoon, the Numidian cavalry returned to the fray, attacking Hannibal's forces from the rear and encircling his troops, just as, 14 years before at Cannae, Hannibal had encircled the forces of Rome. Scipio's victory was stunning. 20,000 Carthaginian troops lay dead. Hannibal's army had been completely destroyed.
Victory for Rome!
Hannibal himself escaped with his life.
Yeah.
And he returned to the city of Carthage. But he'd never lead a Carthaginian army against Rome again. Scipio knew what this victory meant. He'd established himself as Rome's most successful general and had changed the balance of power in the Mediterranean. The Carthaginians had no choice but to beg for peace. They knew that the alternative was annihilation. Rome granted that peace to Carthage, but at massive cost. The terms utterly crippled the old empire's finances and fighting capabilities. Rome's mastery over the ancient world was secured, but even that wasn't enough. Finally, in 146 BC, Roman forces, led by none other than Scipio's grandson, razed Carthage to the ground. The entire population was massacred or enslaved. Scipio's victory over Hannibal marks a tipping point in Rome's history, when an influential city-state becomes an unstoppable imperial power. Over the next 100 years, Rome consolidated its Mediterranean empire. In the 1st century BC, further expansion would bring the imperial power untold wealth. This new glorious age would be led by a figure that still towers over history. Julius Caesar.
Once we cross this river, there will be nothing but violence.
A man whose ruthless ambition would trigger revolution.
Liberty has been recovered. We are free.
And drag Rome, kicking and screaming, into a brand new era. By the 1st century BC, Rome was the most powerful state in the ancient world. Her territories now stretched beyond lands held by Carthage, from what is now Greece and Turkey in the east, across North Africa to Spain in the west. But Rome's hunger for more territory, slaves and wealth meant that her armies were constantly on campaign, looking for opportunities to expand her domain. These armies were spearheaded by a new breed of generals, wealthy men from prominent families honing their military skills on the battlefield, but destined for high office in Rome. Most famous of them was Gaius Julius Caesar, the brilliant orator beloved by his soldiers. Caesar first made his name and his fortune when he led the pitiless conquest of Gaul, modern-day France and Belgium. This was a massive expansion in Rome's footprint, moving northward across mainland Europe, capturing vast territories and great wealth. He even led to invasions of the mysterious island of Britannia in 55 and 54 BC. Both times he secured a foothold in the south of the country, but sketchy knowledge of local conditions and stretched supply lines forced him to pull out. Caesar's bloody campaigns reached a terrible climax in today's Netherlands, when Germanic tribes crossed into Caesar's newly conquered territory. Confronted by Caesar's rampant legions, they begged for mercy. Caesar, with his loyal officer Mark Antony by his side, instead ordered one of the most vicious mass killings in Roman history.
These representatives of the people have come to talk peace.
We'll have to disappoint them then, won't we?
In Caesar's account of the Gallic Wars, he boasted that his troops annihilated the tribes, killing around 150,000 women, men, and children. Up until now, historians have had to rely on Caesar's own written account as the main proof for this horrifying episode. Remarkably, archaeologists working here in the Netherlands believe they may have identified direct evidence of the events that day, and some of the key finds are being held here in the National Museum in Leiden. This newly discovered evidence was dredged from the nearby Maas River and analysed by archaeologist Nico Roymans. What kind of evidence have you been working with to piece together this story?
Here you have a few examples. You have here a skull of an adult person about 60 years old, where the face here was cut off by one sword blow. So that's really a mortal injury, I can tell you.
Yeah, that's horrific, isn't it?
Here an adult woman with a hole here above the one of the eyes caused by a Roman spearhead.
I mean, it's interesting that you're finding women here, because we hear from the accounts that women and children were also slaughtered.
That's exactly what Caesar describes, that he tried to slaughter the complete population.
I mean, historically, this is very exciting, because it's very rare that we get archaeological evidence like this, absolutely buttressing in a very precise way the written record. But emotionally, it's very hard to look at some of this, because you get a sense of the ferocity of Caesar and his campaign.
What he did here in this northern fringe area of Gaul, there was clear cases of massacres and even genocide.
Finds like these should make us redraw our mental picture of Caesar. As well as being an ambitious and brilliant general, he was a brutal and callous warlord. Today, he'd be called a war criminal. He destroyed hundreds of towns and settlements, enslaved and killed hundreds of thousands, possibly even millions of Gauls. This was classic military Rome, right out of the playbook that Scipio had first used against Carthage in Spain. The conquest of Gaul made Rome and Caesar incredibly wealthy. It also made the victorious general wildly popular with the people of Rome as they basked in the reflected glory of Rome's seemingly unstoppable rise. But military success would come at a terrible cost for the Roman Republic. In this first golden age, Rome wasn't controlled by all-powerful emperors, who we might imagine presiding over victory parades and bloody gladiatorial games. It was governed as a republic that purposefully shunned the idea of kings and dictators. Now, the Romans were very proud of their ideal of liberty, and that, as a republic, her citizens had both a voice and a vote. Rule over her expanding empire was, in theory at least, for the people. Assemblies and elections were open to ordinary citizens, but in truth, the Senate was largely dominated by a few powerful and elite families. The clock was ticking on this ancient system of government. "170 miles north of the capital, Rome's three most powerful generals met in secret. They were hatching a plan to divide up sections of the expanded empire between them. Calling the shots, Caesar himself. Before him, Crassus, the richest man in Rome, and Pompey the Great, a brilliant general, conqueror of the East.
Spain for you, Pompey. Syria for you, Crassus.
Syria.
More triumphs, more trophies, more gold, Crassus.
He doesn't need more gold.
You don't need any more triumphs.
And for you, Caesar?
The extension of my governorship of Gaul. 5 more years. Supported by fresh finance from the Senate.
The stubborn old dogs in the Senate will fight it.
The stubborn old dogs of the Senate will be no match for the three of us.
This was a power grab, a plan to seize control of imperial territories. 3 of the richest and most powerful men in Rome, each of them believing that the Roman Empire needed to change from the old order headed by the Senate, each believing that the general who made it great should have more control. Now, there's a rather brilliant thing about the situation here, because we have an eyewitness right at the heart of the Roman political system. His name was Marcus Tullius Cicero, and he wasn't just any old observer, but an incredibly astute and prolific commentator. Thanks to his speeches and his hundreds of letters, we know what was going on at the actual time that it was happening. Cicero was astute enough to know that politics was a dangerous game. Violence was a constant threat from mobs loyal to Caesar and his allies. Oppose Caesar, Pompey or Crassus, and you risked intimidation or sometimes even assassination. It was something that Cicero had experienced firsthand when his beloved home in Rome was ransacked by a hostile mob. So, Cicero felt forced to pledge his loyalty to three generals, even though he was perceptive enough to see that Caesar and his two allies planned to take over the Senate. Crassus's governorship of Syria made him even more wealthy. But he got greedy and invaded the massive Parthian Empire to the east. The military campaign was a disaster, and Crassus himself was captured.
Are you thirsty, Rome?
Legends about the use of molten gold to murder the famously wealthy Crassus were recorded by the Roman historian Cassius Dio. With Crassus gone, the Gang of Three's deal was dead in the water. Caesar acted swiftly to shore up his power. His conquest in Gaul had made him incredibly popular with the plebs of Rome. But now he wanted to secure power for himself back in the capital, even if that meant open conflict with the Senate. Successful generals like Scipio 150 years earlier had gone on to high office before. But the laws of the Republic forced them to give up command of their armies first. The thing was, Caesar had absolutely no intention of giving up the source of his power, his position as general in command of a loyal army. To get around the rules, Caesar needed the help of a senior senator.
Cicero!
So he summoned Cicero, Rome's greatest orator and lawyer, to his headquarters in Ravenna, outside Rome's heartland.
Don't go upsetting him, you old dog, or you'll have me to answer to.
You wish to be elected consul in the upcoming elections?
Yes. My governorship of Gaul is coming to an end.
But you want to keep your armies. I don't think that would be acceptable to the Senate.
The Senate seems determined to punish and humiliate me for bringing glory to Rome.
The law would have to be rewritten.
Rewrite it, then. Why not? They follow you like sheep.
Your opponents rise to their feet every day to declare you an enemy of the Senate and of Rome itself. They are trying their best to turn Pompey round to their side.
Pompey and I had an agreement. I cannot be left defenseless. I simply ask to be treated with the respect due to my rank and experience.
I will see what I can do.
Caesar and the Republic were on a collision course. The ambitious general was gambling everything.
I think you'll find it the safest and most honorable path.
His political future, his life, and maybe even the fate of Rome. Despite Cicero's pledge of support, Caesar's enemies in the Senate denied his request to keep his armies, arguing instead that he be stripped of his command in Gaul. Cicero was following all of this closely from one of his villas outside Rome. His letters give us a unique insight into history as it happened, and as events escalated towards chaos, they grow ever more despairing. In the winter of 50 BC, he was writing almost daily to his friend Atticus. Just listen to this from early December. These men are fighting for personal power at society's risk. Caesar's become so strong that all hope of resistance rests with a single citizen, meaning Pompey. And soon after that, on December the 18th, he is crystal clear about Rome's fate. The political situation gives me greater terror every day. All we want is peace, but a victory may produce a tyrant. Cicero was desolate, with a front row seat as Rome geared up for civil war, a war that would destroy the republic that he so loved. Just a few days after that letter, matters came to a head. The Senate asked Pompey to defend the Republic with arms if necessary. Forced to make a decision, he accepted, and a state of emergency was declared. Caesar was then ordered to relinquish his military command and to return to the city without his army. Caesar was now faced with a critical dilemma. To remain in Gaul meant forfeiting his political power to his enemies. Returning to Rome without an army would verge on the suicidal. The only other option was one that would have devastating consequences. From his base in Ravenna, Caesar planned to travel through the night to meet his army at the Rubicon River, the frontier of the Roman homeland. According to law, any general leading troops across this border would be declared a public enemy. Crossing the Rubicon would be quite simply a declaration of war against the Republic of Rome. This was more than just a personal gamble. Caesar knew that civil war likely lay down this route.
Not a word to anyone. I'll come to that filthy little hovel of yours and slit your throat. Understand? Good.
By striking at the very foundations of the Republic, Caesar was risking the security of the entire empire.
You passed out. I had to haul you out with the river like a fish.
I saw a figure. A woman. Rising out of the water. She told me to go no further.
A dream? We're here.
Say no more of this.
The author Lucan's story of this ghostly vision, as Caesar stood on the threshold of all-out rebellion, speaks of the troubled state of his mind. The decision that Caesar would make on that day would transform the fate of the Roman Empire.
Soldiers of the 13th, loyal friends, I have been your commander for 9 years. We meet here today on the banks of the Rubicon because the Senate and Pompey have decreed that unless I relinquish my command, I shall be branded an enemy of Rome. Gaius Julius Caesar, an enemy of Rome! How dare they! Now we have a choice. We turn back, or we cross this river and we fight against my enemies to prove my honor and my station. What is it to be, men?
On the 10th of January 49 BC, Julius Caesar urged his horse into the icy waters of the Rubicon River. This apparently simple act would set off a chain of events that would come to define the Roman Empire. Even now, crossing a Rubicon means reaching a point of no return, an act with permanent consequences. Caesar had started a civil war, and that decision would shape the course of Roman civilization, which means that its fallout still impacts on all of us today. For Cicero, whatever he intended, and whoever won these battles, the real loser could only be the 500-year-old Republic. We should have resisted Caesar when he was weak. That would have been easy. Now we face 11 legions, cavalry at his command, the city rabble, corrupt youth. A leader of such authority and daring, against this we must either fight or admit his candidature in the law. The only hope left for Cicero and the Senate was Caesar's old accomplice and ally, Pompey. As the two ambitious generals squared off, Rome anxiously awaited her fate. '49 BC, the final days of the Roman Republic. Caesar marched south from the Rubicon to Rome, but Pompey and his supporters abandoned the city, fleeing to Greece where they raised a huge army. Caesar sailed east to meet them, and the two sides finally confronted one another at the decisive Battle of Pharsalus. Facing Pompey's forces on the plains of central Greece, Caesar found himself in a perilous position, isolated, short of provisions, and seriously outnumbered. But then Caesar's men, battle-hardened veterans, employed superior strategy and fighting skills and defied military logic to win Caesar his greatest victory. After this crushing defeat, Pompey went on the run, fleeing to Egypt. Caesar pursued him there, hoping to persuade the Egyptian king, Ptolemy, to hand over his great adversary. But Ptolemy went one step further and handed over Pompey's severed head. Nothing now stood between Caesar and mastery over the Roman Empire. In 46 BC, Caesar returned to Rome. Many of the ordinary people of Rome welcomed him as a returning hero. The Senate felt forced to grant him a triumph, a glorious procession into the city that had no choice but to welcome him with open arms. The Romans always loved a military parade, and it's no different today. Caesar's political revolution was in motion.
The newly tamed Senate awarded Caesar with powers and honours unheard of in the history of the Republic. Titles like Prefect of the Morals and Father of the Fatherland. They even gave him his own religious cult, where he was worshipped as a kind of demigod. Then, in 44 BC, his birthday was declared a public holiday, and the month of Quintilis was renamed Julius, July after him.
To both his enemies and allies, Caesar was manifesting their deepest fears for the Republic. He was behaving like a conquering king, returning to the capital to claim the empire that he had helped seize as his own.
Then, in 44 BC, Caesar made himself dictator for life. A king in all but name.
Rome's republic had been replaced by a military dictatorship. The Senate had been systematically stripped of its powers. Its ranks swelled with Caesar's loyal supporters. 5 years after Caesar crossed the Rubicon, a small group of senators now decided that he'd gone too far, and what they did next would reverberate through history.
I hope this won't be another waste of time.
On the Ides of March, Cicero attended a meeting of the Senate, unaware that inside, Caesar's fate had been sealed.
What's happening? What's going on?
Cicero! Liberty has been recovered. We are free! Join the liberators.
When Caesar had entered the chamber, he was surrounded by around 20 conspirators who stabbed him to death. In the autopsy afterwards, doctors counted 23 wounds on his body.
The murder of Gaius Julius Caesar took place here, right at the heart of Pompey's massive theatre complex. It was a messy business, with the conspirators slashing one another in the confusion. Those who physically had Caesar's blood on their hands were closely connected to the dictator. Casca, who struck first, was an old friend. Marcus Brutus was the son of a long-standing mistress, and Decimus Brutus was a cousin, as well as others who'd been personally forgiven by Caesar for their allegiance to Pompey. But all these personal histories were put aside in a frantic bid to murder their master and to restore the Republic and its values. For Caesar's enemies, he'd come to represent everything that they'd been brought up to fear and to despise. He was a tyrant, an all-powerful dictator, an enemy of the Republic, an enemy of the idea that was Rome.
Cicero had spent most of Caesar's tyranny either praising the dictator or sulking in semi-retirement.
But with Caesar's murder, he sprang back into life. He didn't actually go and join the murderers when they regrouped on Capitoline Hill, but he did write this to one of them. "Congratulations. I rejoice. I love you and have your interests at heart." And then he later added, "How I wish that you'd invited me to that splendid feast on the Ides of March. there would have been no leftovers, by which he meant that he'd have made sure that Mark Antony and Caesar's other supporters had also been killed. Later, he wrote justifying the murder, describing tyranny as a crime punishable by death, a crime against humanity.
In the days and weeks after Caesar's murder, Cicero and others worked hard to restore the Republic. But it was too late. Rome's Republic had been destroyed by the generals who helped make it great, unleashing forces that couldn't be stopped. In the civil war that followed Caesar's assassination, two men battled not to restore the Republic, but to win personal mastery over a Roman Empire that now stretched from the English Channel to the deserts of Syria. On one side, Caesar's adopted son, Octavian. On the other, Caesar's most loyal lieutenant, Mark Antony. In victory, Octavian wasn't shy about titles. He renamed himself Caesar Augustus and became the first official emperor of Rome. The empire not only survived revolution and civil war, but thrived. Augustus's reign was the longest and most celebrated in Rome's history, heralding a new era of wealth, enslavement and conquests as the empire tightened its grip on the ancient world. Welcome to Rome's age of emperors.